Boom. Okay. Kia ora, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of Pastors Knowledge. It's a special episode because today is Matariki. So happy Matariki to our listeners out there. Tane, do you want to explain what Matariki is to our listeners?
So Matariki is our Māori New Year. So it's a time to reflect. It's a time to celebrate family, friends, whānau, and just, reflect on the new year that's coming, reflect on what can come in the next year. And
it's an awesome time to just spend some time with people that are important in your life, reflect on what's important in your life. But the cool thing is why it's a special day is because this is the first time it's a public holiday in New Zealand, which is amazing because Matariki has been around for a very long time, very, very, very long time. But it's awesome that we're actually acknowledging the fact that it is an important part of our culture here in New Zealand. So long may this continue, and long may we continue with accepting the diversity that lives in our worlds, which is very cool, which is also public holiday today, which is great. So, Tanya, since we last spoke, what has entered your mind? What have you learned?
I think my biggest learning, and this is reflecting on a conversation I had last week, is how just getting to know people and simple things like knowing people's names and knowing a little bit about them can go a long way. I think in a world so diverse and where you meet so many people and get so much information, sometimes you feel like you don't belong in that certain area, but being able to actually have small things where you get to know somebody actually goes a long way. And for example, when I go in for my placement for schools, I'm only there for an hour a week, and so I don't get much opportunity to get to know these students, but by simply knowing their name and a little bit about them, they actually respond a lot better when I am with them, because they go, oh, he actually knows who I am. I'm not just, a student that he sees once an hour. So those small personable things that you don't think is that much actually goes a long way for those students or for people in general.
Yeah, what a fantastic learning, because I think, like you said, in the world at the moment, everyone's just so busy doing things and trying to do lots of things that you forget about the simple things. And the most simple thing in the whole wide world is just remembering somebody's name. If we break it right down, if you remember somebody's name, it shows that you've actually taken time to get to know them. And a little bit, whatever it is, whether you know them for a second or 2 days, whatever, the fact that you've taken time to know their name is important. Which then reflects back to my learning, because it's about, when you think about the world, which, like I said before, Tana, is always busy. There's lots of these gadgets and, technologies out there. And you break it right down to what is the most important thing in the whole wide world. And as we know, it's the people. And this was very important to me yesterday when I was dropping off the rental car. And I just dropped the rental car, and I go to the same place all the time. And the reason I go to the same place all the time is because the people know who I am. They group me by name. I know them by name. They could charge me probably 3 times more, but I'll still go back to them because they know my name. Whereas if I go to another company, then I'm just a product. Show me your money later on. Whereas with these people, I can have a conversation. They'll ask me, hey, what are you doing? And I think it goes back to right down to that. And I think this is why our guest today is going to be really important, because it's important to know people, and also Tanya, which is why I think you're good at what you do. You just take time to get to know people. Once again, we're going to stop blabbing because it's not about us. We're going to introduce our guest. And as always, so listeners out there, we try and bring guests onto our podcast that we think are amazing. Actually, everyone's amazing out there, as you always say. And today's guest is someone that I've gotten to know over the last few years, which has been my privilege. And welcome to our podcast, Faithing.
Awesome. Talafalawa. Thank you for having me on this podcast.
Brilliant. No, thank you for joining us. So Faithing, I know who you are a little bit. Do you want to tell our listeners out there who you are at this point in time in your life, and then we'll go backwards?
Yeah. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Faithing Notoa. I am of Samoan descent. I I'm currently residing in Taupo. I'm taking a gap year this year. I'm from the villages. I was born in Samoa, in Satawa, Savaii. I was brought up in West Auckland for like 1 year around Ranui. And then I mainly grew up in Flaxmere, Hawke's Bay. And then now I'm residing in Taupo.
Oh, well, thanks so much for that, Faithing. And what an amazing story, right, so far. So if we take you back to where you grew up, to Samoa, what is that like? And how old were you before you left?
Oh, wow. I was Back in Samoa, we grew up in Savaii. So Savaii is the bigger island in Samoa, but it's people call it the real Samoa because Apia, where's the main island, it's very modernized, whereas Savaii is very rural. So everybody lives off the land. So basically, what we were eating were just foods off the land, plantation and stuff like that. But I think I was there until like I was 4 years old.
Okay.
But I was brought up. It's funny because my villages, when you say what village you're from, so my villages from my dad's side is Tufuta Foe, and my mom's side is Mataututa. But I don't I don't call those my village because I was actually brought up in another village called Falealupo. And the reason why I say that is because I know a lot of people there, and everyone, when we grew up in there, everyone sort of, helped look after us because my parents were pastors. And so, we had like this whole village where everyone would take care of us. They all knew us ever since we were young. They still remember us now, even though we haven't been back to the islands in a long time. Yeah.
It's crazy because remember your name. They remember your name, right? I think go back to
Yeah.
They remember your name exactly. Yeah, and that's pretty cool for you because you have this whole extended whānau and family that you've just got. You have your blood family, but then in a lot of indigenous cultures around the world, you have that extended family, which give you all that other stuff which others, if it's an individual, you forget about and you don't have. So you said you grew up off the land. Do you remember what that was like? Or was that?
No, I actually don't remember what it was like. But the last time I was in Samoa, which was 2019, for my 21st, I sort of had like little flashback moments when I was back in the island. Like, I just remember like looking at the food and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember these when I was young. Like some of the foods that we eat are like bats. We eat bats. And I remember when I was just going for a little drive with my cousin to get some petrol for the car, and we stopped halfway through, and my uncle like waved us down and he was like, oh here, take this back to the village. And he literally just put like I think it was a cow, like half of a cow, literally, and just like plumped it at the back of the truck. And I was just sitting there with the dead cow right next to me, like already dead, and like blood everywhere, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, it was it's very like the food definitely tastes different, because obviously there's no like artificial flavors or anything, nothing's processed, everything is just like
Just fresh.
pure meat. Yeah. And it does, like when you taste it, you're like, what the heck, this tastes so weird. But then you remember that like this is what natural food tastes like because of being brought up around processed food and stuff. It's so weird going back to like the original like that. Yeah.
And I totally resonate with that because whenever I go back to Africa and every time I have chicken, I'm like, this chicken tastes so different. Why is it so different?
Yeah.
It's because it's organic. Or organic. I mean, it's just real. When the word organic is just I don't know, it's just a selling product. But in Samoa, everything is organic. Everything's just out there doing its thing, living its life. So the flavors are so different. You're so right. So you grew up there, and then you moved to West Auckland. What is that? I mean, as a 4-year-old, you probably don't. It wouldn't be I don't know. Would it be a big transition as a 4-year-old, or be like, all right, cool, this is life?
Yes. It was such a huge transition. I was probably 5 around this time. We grew up in Ranui.
Okay, yeah.
We grew up in Ranui in West Auckland. I think I remember that was like the hood of West Auckland. But yeah, I just remember it like I just remember it being colder than it was. Obviously the weather changed, but I remember like moving to New Zealand, like we weren't really well off, and I just remember like going to op shops, going to garage sales, like buying secondhand stuff. My mum would buy everything, and sometimes I remember going to school with like different pairs shoes.
Oh wow.
I don't know how that happened, but I just remember going to school with different pairs of shoes and like my hair being everywhere and not knowing what the hell I was doing. Just following my siblings. We would walk to school as well. My
Okay,
siblings
yeah.
would walk us to school. I remember seeing a dairy, always buying the $2 mince and cheese pies. But yeah, funny enough, I remember my principal's name when
Oh
we were at,
wow.
his name was Mr. Diamond.
Oh wow.
And that's how I remember his name, was just because his like
It's,
surname was a shape.
yeah,
So
crazy. Crazy,
random.
crazy. So you went from eating fresh fruit to having mince pies. How cool is how crazy is that, eh? And growing up, how many siblings do you have? How big is
Oh my gosh. Well, I have 8 siblings.
yep,
So I'm one of 9 and I'm the 4th oldest.
yeah,
So yeah, I have a really massive family.
yeah. And did your whole family move over in when you moved back from Samoa to New
Yes.
Zealand? Oh wow, that would
So
have
we
been
moved over, there was only 5 of us.
okay, yep.
And I was the second youngest at that time.
Oh wow.
And then obviously it grew to my parents decided to have 4 more babies after that.
Wow.
Um,
Oh
yeah.
wow. What a great family there. And then so you're now living in Ranui.
Yeah.
Then you moved to Flaxmere. How old were you when you moved to
Yes.
Flaxmere? And for our listeners out there, do you want to explain Flaxmere, what Flaxmere is like as well?
Flaxmere is a little town that is in Hastings. So Hastings is like a town, but then in it is like another town called Flaxmere. And it's quite rural. It's again the hood. We
Yeah.
call it the hood of Hastings, and it's basically where a lot of majority of our Pacifica and Māori people reside.
Yeah.
It's not doesn't really have that many like people, so the population wasn't really that big when we moved there. So when
Yeah.
we first moved there weren't that many islanders as well,
Yeah.
Pacific Islanders, and then now it's like slowly Hastings Hawke's Bay is slowly becoming another Pacific hub.
Yes.
And that's just because Hawke's Bay is known to be the fruit bowl of New Zealand, and so that's where a lot of the overseas workers from the islands come over, where they pick the apples, the blueberries, any sort of fruit you think of that's in Hawke's Bay.
Yeah.
And so you have this whole influx of Pacific Islanders from the islands coming over to, make money for their families back home, and then eventually some of them decide to stay
Yeah.
because they love it.
Exactly, crazy. And in this, and thank you for that, because I think it's important to put some context as to what Flaxmere was like when you moved there, And so you come from Samoa, Pacific culture galore. You go to Auckland where things are changing a little for you. Then go to Flaxmere where your Pacific identity is now, wait a minute, I don't see other Pacific around me. What is that like for you as a young person growing up there? Because I'm guessing you did your schooling there as well in Flaxmere.
Yes. Oh man, I would say that it was actually like, I think people often tend to forget about Pacific Islanders living in rural places because naturally we always think even in the media as well, even just everywhere we look, even people when they think Pacific Islanders, the first place they think of is South Auckland.
That's right, exactly.
And they tend to forget about the other rural places where a lot of our Pacific communities are growing. And so growing up in Flaxmere, man, it was actually quite hard. I would say, like, the same things we experience any other place in New Zealand. The racism was there, the stereotypes, especially because Flaxmere was a highly, like, there was a lot of just a lot of things going on around there. And so when anyone knew you were from Flaxmere, it was sort of like, oh, that person's from Flaxmere, like, they're from the hood, like. And so growing up there, I would say that Hawke's Bay was quite a, Pākehā sort of orientated town and city. And so it was quite hard because, you go from Auckland, when we were living in Auckland, there were so many islanders, so many brown faces, and it was just so diverse. And then you go into this rural area, and it's like hard to find someone that looks like you. It's hard to find a brown person. It's like try and spot the brown person, but in Auckland, it's like try and spot the white person. But yeah, that's what it was like growing up in Flaxmere. It was like you hardly saw any Pacific faces. And everything was just very white orientated. But yeah.
Yeah, and I guess this is I'm gonna an assumption now. This would have challenged your identity because now you're a young person, and young people across the world, you try and fit into. You have your culture, but you also have society around you. Did you find it a struggle to balance the two? That actually I have to. My identity is who I am, but now I go to school and I face whatever you face. Was it a challenge for you? Or
Oh, yes, of course, it was a huge challenge. I think because I think what made it even harder is that the school that I was going to, there was no support whatsoever for Pacific students.
okay, yeah,
And like I would always be like so jealous of my cousins when I would go to Auckland and visit them, because I would see how proud they were to be Pacific, and how strong and bold they were, and they weren't afraid to sort of say what was on their mind, to say their ideas, to bring the ideas to the table. Whereas growing up in Flaxmere and going to a predominantly white school, there was no Pacific staff. We did have Māori staff, but they were normally not like, you could see the prejudice within the school, like, looking down on other teachers that but yeah, there was no support whatsoever. And like even looking back now, sometimes I wish, like I think about my friends, my other Pacific friends as well, and how much like how far they could have gotten if they had that same support. If they had a Pacific dean or a Pacific teacher that was there to help them. And yeah, just no support whatsoever in school. And it was sort of just like every man for their, like,
themselves,
woman for their own, you just go through this school and it's up to you what you want to do,
yeah. And given that you had that environment to do your schooling in, what made you decide that university? How was university an option for you there? Because given you have all these crazy struggles here, you don't have the support. Let's talk about that there.
Yeah, that's, oh my gosh. When I was in high school, uni was not even in the picture at all.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't really a smart person in high school. I was just like an average high schooler, just going through the motions. But it wasn't actually it wasn't until I think it was year 12. My chemistry teacher, Mr. Williams, I still remember him. Somehow I was just doing really well in chemistry, and I remember him coming up to me and telling me, like, you're really good. You're really good at this, and then he was the one who was actually like, have you ever considered going, doing further studies with chemistry, or like, and I was like, no. That never crossed my mind. And because at like my school, we never had any talks about like university. I literally had to find everything by myself.
Yeah.
But they did talk about university, but it was very subtle. But it wasn't like they'll come and help you. Like they'll talk about the study link, student loans, student allowance. They never talked about any of that. And so I was just like, what is university? And then he explained to me. And I would say from that interaction with my teacher, he really actually like made me like think about my life after high school. He made me think about what were my plans after high school, what did I want to do? And so that was the moment where university became something that I wanted to do and to go to. Yeah. And so it was quite sad because the year after that, in my year 13, he left. He had to go somewhere. I don't know. He went back to Australia, I think, or something. But he was, he was a really good teacher. And I don't think I don't think that he realized how much of an impact or an influence that he had on me, or maybe on other people as well. But yeah.
And that's really beautiful. And that's the power of the interaction that people have. And, even though you might not have had a Pacifica support staff, the fact that a teacher was like, I don't really care whether you're Pacifica or Pakeha or Asian or whatever, you're good at chemistry. I'm not going to talk to you about your further studies. And that's so important, And I think, you remembered your principal's name from your primary school, Mr. Diamond. You remembered him because they're crucial people in your life, for whatever reason, they're crucial people. And I'm also assuming at this point in time, you would be the first in your family to think about university, in your immediate family.
Well, my sister was actually, but she didn't go into university straight at this time.
Yep.
When I was in high school. She was just going to an institute in Hawke's Bay,
Yep.
before going to university.
Awesome.
But yeah, my sister was the first one.
Oh, brilliant.
But at that time, I didn't think about university because my sister wasn't at university at that time. She was
Gotcha.
she was just still here at an institute. So yeah.
So now you have this revelation. Oh, hey, further study could be an option for me. Did that change your outlook at school once this was a reality for you?
Yeah, it did change my outlook at.
So, sorry, technology. We love technology. The question was, once you had interaction with Mr. Williams about your study, did that change your outlook on school from year 12 onwards?
Yeah, it did change my outlook on school. I guess I wanted to do well now. I was like committed to doing well in my studies, making sure that I was getting the grades in order to get into uni. And sort of, I don't know, I guess when I was studying, I wanted to do it not just for anyone else, but I wanted to do it for myself. And one thing I learned is that like I'm someone who likes proving people wrong. So I wanted to prove myself that I was like, this girl from Flaxmere was able to make it to uni.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because many of our podcast guests over the last few weeks have said that exact thing, that somebody in their life has said no to them, that this can't happen, and they just wanted to prove them wrong, that actually this can happen, whatever that was. And for you, that was for yourself. Hey, this stereotype about Flaxmere. As a Pacifica young person who's Flaxmere, I don't want to break that stereotype and go, actually, wait a minute, this is an option for me, which is beautiful. So now you have this revelation. Yeah, bring it on. What happens then for you? You have choice. For our listeners out there, Flaxmere is in the Hawke's Bay. The Hawke's Bay has got no university close in that region there. So if Faithing wanted to go, she has to leave home to go to university. So you had choice now. You had choice and
options. Well, I knew I was never going to go to Auckland because I don't know, Auckland just seems too intense for me. And the life just seems too fast. And then Waikato, never really an option. All I know is that I wanted to go to somewhere where it was like the support was like really huge and big, especially the Pacific support. And so it wasn't until I actually saw a poster in my school in our year 13 common room. It was a poster. It said the Pacific on-campus experience.
Yeah.
Funny story, I applied for it and I didn't get it. But I still wanted to go to, I was still curious about Otago because I was like, what the heck, Otago? I've never heard of this university. I did some Google, I did my research, found out it was the first university in New Zealand. And then I saw more information. I saw their scholarships and everything. And yeah, so then I applied and then they got back to me. I got a scholarship. I wanted to do first year health science. Yeah, I did. I literally just knew all of this through literally going online and reading every single thing about what to do when you're first year. Like, yeah, I did all of that. And then I realized that I didn't do physics. I didn't do physics, so I couldn't actually make the cut. So I got the scholarship, but I actually didn't even have the credits
subjects.
because I didn't do physics
Yeah.
or first year house science. So I remember like crying in my room because I was like, what the heck? I should have taken physics. And because obviously I had known this, and it was like halfway through my year 13, so I was obviously too late to do physics.
Chris, yeah.
And then I got an email. I got an email from La'i. She works for the Pacific Foundation program back then.
Yeah.
And I just got a random email. And honestly, I feel like it was like a miracle. I got an email saying, hey, there's this program called the Pacific Foundation program. If you've never done physics or chemistry or any of that, in order to get into first year health science, you can study this. But not only that, but like we will give you a scholarship and we will pay for your accommodation. And I remember seeing that email and I was just like, is this real? Like, is this a fake email? Am I getting spammed? But yeah, that's how it happened. And then, you know, I applied for it. I got the PFP scholarship. And then the rest is, you know,
The rest is
that's
history.
how my university, that's how my university journey started. And honestly, I look back and I'm like, what the heck? Like, to get that email, and then like I remember because I got that email, and I think the closing date for the scholarship was like 2 days later. So I remember, I remember like running around, like writing like emailing my references, writing down my letter of like why I think I deserve to have this scholarship. And then when I got it, I was just like, oh my gosh, like bawling my eyes out again because I was like, what the heck? I thought I wasn't gonna go to uni, and now I am going to uni. But yeah, that's how I ended up in Otago.
What a crazy emotional journey, you know. What about your family and your father around that? So now you are going to go to university. What do they think about this? Because again, for listeners out there, it's not close. It's pretty far from the Hawke's Bay. It's another island. And
yeah.
how do the conversations
I guess
go?
my my family was, I mean, my parents, obviously the first question was why so far away, but then again, like my parents sort of came around to acknowledging and accepting that, you know, that I wanted to go to this university, and you know, I sort of did a pitch to them like, I'm getting a scholarship, you know, like we don't have to pay anything. So, you know, I think the scholarship was really it for my parents because, you know, they were saying, you know, they did request Auckland and stuff, but I didn't really like Auckland, just the environment and stuff. So my parents were happy with me. And I know my dad was as well, especially my dad. He went to me. He went to Vic on scholarship from Auckland. So my dad sort of understood. And but at the same time, they were really sad about it, obviously, because I'm going to another island.
Yeah, totally.
and my family have never been to the South Island as well. So my parents were quite worried about that going down. But lucky enough, my dad was able to come down with me when I came down for PFP, and they actually paid for his flight as well. So when my dad came down and he saw, like, he was able to see the uni and able to see everything, he was then, you know, he was very comfortable and in knowing that I was in good hands. Yeah.
Because that's important, you know, your family, your whānau, and everyone else that cares about you wants to make sure that you're going to a place where you're not going to be forgotten. So which is a big step and a big journey. So we're not going to go into the nitty-gritty of Otago. We're going to talk about your journey. And so you do this foundation year. You want to health sciences. What happens then? So you do this foundation year with a lot of other Pacifica students, which would have been awesome for you as a young person. Oh, well, actually, let's go back. What is that like for you? So you meet all these other Pacifica around the country now in the same cohort. How is that for you?
Oh, well, It
Was
was,
it? I don't know. I don't know what it was like.
I loved it. Man, I loved like just me as a person. I love meeting other people. I love meeting new people. And when I made the decision to go down to Dunedin, in a sense, my parents, especially my dad, they weren't surprised at the same time because they know me as that person that likes taking risks, doing things out of the ordinary. So, but like meeting everyone, all the other Pacific Islanders from different cities around New Zealand, it was empowering. Just like seeing different faces, it made me feel very at home seeing other Pacific Islanders from different towns and stuff, especially because when you go to uni, like when I went down to Dunedin, I was like, oh my gosh, is this like another like white place like Hawke's Bay? But to see the other faces around you, the other faces that look at you, not just that, but the staff as well, to know that they had a Pacific Island Centre, to know that they had Pacific support, just gave me that sense of belonging.
And that's really awesome. So in that first year, now you meet all these other from around the country, and also the other thing I want to also highlight is just because you're Pacific Islander, you all have your different, because you're from Samoa. You would have met Tongans, Fijians, Niueans, Vanuatuans. What is that like for you now? You come into this place where there's a melting pot of all these different Pacific Islanders.
Honestly, it was so cool. I loved because us as Pacific Islanders, even though we're all from different islands, countries and stuff, when we come together, you feel a sense of joy when you learn about other people's cultures and you see the similarities, you see the differences. And one thing, the friends that I met, one was from Tonga, another one was from Tuvalu, another one was from Kiribati. We would sing songs in each of, their language. And I found that very heartwarming, especially because I feel like music always brings us Pacific Islanders together. It's a way of us for expressing ourselves. But yeah, it was really good learning different cultural words, language, and songs, and as well as like their practices. But yeah, you feel a sense of mafana. It's like a Tongan word for when your heart is full. You feel
beautiful. That's so beautiful, because it goes back to what you said at the start. Diversity and people are just it just changes your perspective on life in a whole different way. So you do PFP. Do you do health first year then, or do you decide that actually you wanted something totally different?
I did do health first year.
Yep.
And it's funny because when I went into first year health my whole thought was pharmacy. Wanted to get into pharmacy just because I did chemistry and stuff, but I still didn't know where I was going. Like I said, I'm just going with the flow. So the first thing that's coming to my mind is pharmacy because I was like chemistry. But then a new degree came in called the Bachelor of Health Science. And honestly, it's like everything was like literally in my life, it's like everything was like everything aligned.
Yeah.
Because they do these things called bubble lunches at Dinner Support, and they had these lunches, and we only went because they had, it was free lunch, obviously.
Let's be honest,
this one lunch that I went to, who's like the head of Pursue, she's talked about a new degree called the Bachelor of Health Science. And she started talking about it, and then she said that you can major in Pacific and Global Health. And as soon as she said that, I knew. I was like, this is what I'm going to study. And it was at that time, it was a very complicated time because that was a time when we had to apply for our
Professional programs.
for our professional programs. So at this time, I had already gotten all my references. I had already filled out my application for pharmacy and everything. And then I had to make a decision because I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, and so yeah, I decided to. I was applying. I was applying for the health professional programs, and then I had to make a decision. But one thing that Ty talked about at the Popo lunch is that because they wanted more people to major in Pacific and Global Health, they were able to get scholarships again through the Ministry of Health. And so automatically I was like, yes. As soon as I heard scholarship, I was like, yes. So so I decided to take it, and also told them, because I was the only, like, my friends didn't come to that, so I was the only one that knew about it. So then I didn't want to do this by myself. I didn't want to do this by myself. So I told my friends, and I told them about the scholarships. And two of them came on, and they did the scholarship. They did it with me. We got the scholarship and everything, which was great. So yeah, that's how I ended up down that path of public health.
Awesome. And so you did was it public health or Pacific Health? Which one did you end up doing?
So it's Bachelor of Health Science, but is basically public health. But I majored in Pacific and Global Health.
Awesome. And right, so this is awesome. Now it seems like the world is aligning for you. Everything seems to be aligning. Now we're not going to talk about your study. I want to talk about you as a person. That you've come here as a young Pacifica Wahine. You come to Otago. And what are the things that start your passions as you start going through what do you start noticing, and what starts driving you as you start going into your becoming a young adult, I guess?
Yeah, one of the things that drove me was just the amount of Pacific people, Pacific students at the university that were so like outspoken, that demanded support, and when I joined a student association, the Samoan Student Association, I got to learn more about my cultural identity, and got to learn that, like, doing this, like studying, I wasn't just doing it for myself, I was also doing it for my family, doing it for the further generations to come. And so that sort of really moved me, and that's where my passion came for Pacific Health specifically, and especially looking at the mental health statistics around New Zealand and the health statistics, especially because coming from a place like Flaxmere, the statistics there in terms of suicide is devastating. It's crazy. And I, growing up, and when I grew up in Hawke's Bay, when I was in intermediate, I remember the intermediate, that's when it started, when there were a lot of suicides that happened. And I remember every single one, like growing up and just hearing the news. And some of these were even people that I knew, some of them were friends of friends, some of them were friends, brothers, sisters and stuff. So that's where my passion drew for Pacific Health, and where my passion drew as a person, just to see our Pacific individuals and our Pacific communities thrive. But yeah, that's where.
Yeah. And what a shift there, because earlier on you said you were going to university for yourself. This is for you. Yeah, this is my jam. But when you come to university, you actually realize when there's a greater purpose that you can serve. But also it goes back to where you've come from, because your greater purpose is linked to what you experienced while you're growing up as a young person. So it all ties in. So what did you end up doing at university to try and bring this for yourself, to bring it forward and go, hey, actually this is something we've got to think about? Did you join the clubs? Did you advocate for things? Or how did you make yourself known?
Oh, well, obviously I joined a Samoan association, and through that I'm so grateful that I did that, because I didn't really grow up traditionally in a traditional Samoan way. My parents were always very open to understanding that Samoa, New Zealand, two different places, However, I was raised around the values of respect, service, love, the same values that we grew up in Samoa, but I wasn't really familiar with the practices that we had. And so when I joined this club, I was able to learn about the practices, like why we have certain practices in place. I learned more about our culture. Not only that, I learned how to dance. I never danced. I never did like any Siva Samoa when I was young. So to be able to dance, like I said again, I had such a full heart just learning how to dance, learning how to sing in my own language, and learning more about my culture was just very empowering. And then, sorry, I just had like a mind blank.
That's all good. That's all good. It is Friday. It's all good. You're allowed to do that. Yeah. I'll bring Tana in here. So Tana, I mean, you're going through the same thing right now, right? You are now, I guess, rediscovering or refining your Māoridom, I guess, in a different way while you're at university.
Yeah, definitely. Being able to learn the language is one thing, but I guess also getting to know the Māori community. And I guess as Faithing is saying, I was the same. I wasn't brought up in the traditional way where I was brought up on the marae or got to know extended whānau or any of that, not because mainly because my parents hadn't discovered that when they were growing up. And so it was a miss in the generation. So that's why for me, it's a pride thing about getting to know my culture, but also not feeling like I have to, but because I want to. There's a difference between feeling like you have to because that's your culture and that's your identity, but actually finding out about the culture, and then I can decide on how that identifies with my values, and also some of the values that I've already grown up with without being in that environment, but that is accustomed to my Māori values and my Māori identity.
And it's really cool that you said you've both said you did it not because you had to, but because you wanted to. It's something that you're actually, this is coming from an internal driver, as opposed to, I'm just ticking a box because I've grown up as Māori or Samoan or Indian or whatever it is that I have to do these things here. So that's where you get the greatest learning and the greatest appreciation for why and how you're doing things. And talking about appreciation of human beings, I think you were a sub-warden RA. How was that? What was that like for you? Because you were a sub-warden / RA, whatever the titles are, at one of the biggest colleges at Otago. How was that for you?
So I was a sub-warden at Studham College first in 2020, and then a sub-warden at Unico last year. To be honest, I loved it. Like I said again, I love getting to meet new people. And the reason why I became a sub-warden is because I wanted to give back in terms of the collegiate life, because when I was a first year and I, someone coming from a rural area into Dunedin, my RA was Māori, and then there was another RA as well who was a Pacific Islander, and they played such a huge part in making me feel comfortable, making me settle into university. And I still look at them like, man, they're so amazing. They're still doing great things now, but the influence that they had and the impact that they had on me, I just wanted to give that back to the next sort of generation. And I think that's something that's always been in our Pacific cultures, is that when people give to you, then you give that to other people, sort of like, giving back. That's why I became a sub-warden, because I wanted to be there for our Māori and Pacific students that were coming into uni that may have come from rural areas as well, may not feel comfortable, feeling that homesickness as well. So I just wanted to make them feel what I felt when I was a first year. But yeah.
Yeah. And it's so crazy that your driver was similar but different to my driver when I became a subordinate slash RA. You mean your driver was you wanted people to feel welcomed and felt how you felt, whereas my driver was the other way. My driver was I wanted to make people feel that the way I didn't feel, because when I came, I landed and I was left alone, and I was just like, okay, whatever, you've arrived. And to me, I was like, whoa, if I feel this, how many other people are going to be coming to university feeling the same thing? So my driver was similar to yours, but different. Similar in terms that I wanted to help, but different because I wanted no one to feel the same way that I felt it. I felt. So, but at the end of the day, it's awesome. And also, Tanya, I think you're the same as well. You became a subordinate. I use the name interchangeably because I have no idea what people call them these days, because of your experience as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. Being able to, I just know how meaningful it was in my first year to have subordinates, and it was like an older sibling, you're not a parent, you're not there all the time to tell the students what to do or when to do it, but you're there when they need it. And I always found that my subordinates were able to come to me at the times that I needed. And, that was something I found interesting, because I never thought, you never thought that they were going to come, but they did. And it was just, when you were feeling that you needed a bit of help, they were there. So that was awesome to see. And that's what I like to do now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you're just great humans, the two of you, really, to be honest. So you at this time, Faith, you are not identifying. You're getting more in tune with your Samoan culture. You are now doing a Pacific Studies health science major. You are a sub-warden. How do those worlds interact for you, and what is the biggest challenge for you in trying to gravitate those three things there for you?
I think
And again, sorry, I'll just mention the three that we know. There's obviously a lot more happening in your life at the same time as well. Yeah.
Oh man, I would say 2020, looking back 2020, the beginning of my sub-warden journey was great. And then it wasn't until COVID hit, because 2020, that's when COVID hit. We were in lockdown, and I was able to balance everything at the beginning, and then it wasn't until that time, lockdown, because I wasn't just balancing my studies, my subordinate life, and then my cultural identity. I also new problems arise during the time of lockdown, and a lot of family stuff arose from that. And I would be honest, my mental health wasn't that great. It sort of plateaued when I went into subwarden, and being in that place, it's quite hard, because when you're looking after people, you're so focused on looking after the first years that sometimes you forget about looking after yourself. And that was me in 2020. If I could explain myself, that was me. I was giving and giving, and my cup eventually became empty, and I was still giving from an empty cup, which was really bad. And I would say that I did come to a burnout. I did come to a moment where I was burnt out. And then I came back up again. And then I went down to being burnt out, which is why I'm taking a gap year.
Yeah.
But I sort of think that in terms of the subordinate life, it's a really good experience. But at the same time, I think it's important to be aware of, it's the most important time to be aware of yourself as well, and what you are giving, because obviously it's great, helping other people, but you need to know your limits. You need to have boundaries as well. And if I was honest, 2020, I didn't have any boundaries whatsoever, which is why I would say I got burnt out. But yeah.
And so and that's really fascinating, because fascinating in the sense that you got burnt out, and the fascination for me comes that, okay, I've been burnt out, I've done this, but I'm going to be a subordinate again the following year.
Yeah.
But this time not even in a small place, and like you said at the start,
A bigger
one of the
place.
big colleges, one of the biggest places. What made you do that then? I mean, it's not a bad thing, but what is the
like I said, I look back at it now, and I'm just like, man, why did I do that? But I guess I am such one thing I would admit is that I was as much as I was a people giver, like I was a people pleaser at the same time as well. I do feel like I was at a stage where I just wanted to give and please people at that time, obviously. And even the same thing that happened to me in 2020 with Stardom happened to me again, because not only was I working, studying, I was also the president of an association. So I had all these things. And looking back at it now, I'm always like, and I'm happy that during the end of 2020, I like sought some help from a counselor. I started to see a counselor, and I still saw a counselor and a therapist in last year, throughout 2021. And she helped me unpack why my thinking was like that and why my behavior was like that. So 2020 had a burnout and then got back up again, decided to do the same thing again, and the same thing happened. So it looked like I needed to learn the hard way. But I think one thing I learned while I was with the counselor and unpacking why my behavior was like that was simply just because I grew up in a household where my parents were always on the go, always on the go. And sometimes around like there's this huge Pacifica stigma, especially within our Samoan culture, where it's like, if you're not working or if you're not doing something, then you're lazy or you're weak, you know what I mean? And if you're not, and I truly believe like that was the reason why I put myself out there again last year, is just because I was like, no, I need to keep doing something. I need to keep working and stuff like that. But obviously didn't end well. But yeah, that's that's
And it's amazing. It's an amazing awareness there. And I know, Tanya, we've spoken before about yourself as well. And I'm the same as well, that, we just keep doing things, and it's important to look after ourselves and go, actually, it's okay to say no. It's okay just to go, nah, I'm just going to sit and do nothing. And it's okay. And not feel guilty about it. That's the key thing.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And it's such a cultural thing as well. Like even now, it's so hard. Like even when I talk about it to other fellow Samoans or like my siblings or my parents, they're like, "What break? What is that?" This whole self-care thing is like out of topic because we grew up in a very like very work ethnic environment. But also I also feel like it's also because like coming from an a very chilled environment in Samoa to coming to New Zealand where everyone's on the grind, everyone is
hustling,
everyone's hustling. And it's so like, even if you want to take a break, everyone's like, oh my gosh, taking a break, like what are they doing with their life? The whole stigma, the whole judgment comes with it, and even the pressure comes with it as well. Like even now taking gap year, I still have a lot of people like telling me like, what are you doing with your life? Like I've graduated 2 times, and I've had so many like aunties and people saying like, what are you doing? Like you graduated, like what's a break? And when I tell them, oh, like I'm just taking a break, but it's looked down upon, like it's very frowned upon in my culture if you studied and then you're taking a break.
And this must be hard for you. And I want to touch on two things here. The number one is, I'm going to go back just a little bit and talking about you reaching out to a counselor, because that is also a big cultural stigma around, actually just normal, forget about Pacifica, just normal life. But I'm guessing in the Pacific culture and the most indigenous cultures, going to say to someone, I'm going to a counselor, is like, what? How was that for you?
Oh my gosh.
To take that step, to go from, I actually need help.
Well, I actually called I think it's the youth line or the line. I called them first because I started, as my mental health was deteriorating, I wasn't able to perform well in my studies. My studies were like fully went down. the drain. I wasn't getting good grades. And eventually it just affected my mental health because my mental health was deteriorating. It affected every single part of my life, even the relationships that I had with people, my interactions with people, it wasn't as it was before. And I guess it just got to a point where I knew I needed help. And it's sort of like ironic, maybe it isn't, but like because I study public health, we study these things. We talk about mental health and stuff. And I think the reason why what made me reach out to a counselor was just because I thought to myself, like, I sort of felt like a hypocrite that I was learning about these things, like mental health and all these things, and later on going to help people further. And I was like, I sort of felt like a hypocrite that I was learning about it and that I wasn't even able to do it in my own life. Sort of practice it in my own life, if that makes sense. And so I made the first step to call the youth health line, the youth line, which was nerve-wracking because I was a mess. And so they were just like, they told me the process of getting in contact with a counselor. So then eventually got in touch with a counselor through student health. Amazing counselor. And then I did tell them that I wanted someone who was an Indigenous of Indigenous descent. I did not want someone who was Pākehā because they wouldn't be able to understand, and they did. So they have a Samoan counselor there, which I was mind blown about. I was so happy because I was like, oh my gosh, like can't wait. I'm so happy that I did reach out to a counselor because I know that I wouldn't be here right now. I know I wouldn't be aware of my behavior, of my actions, of my attitudes more. Because when you're going through that whole mental health, like, when your mental health is deteriorating, you always like look at yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the problem, like something's wrong with me. But then eventually when you go and sit down with someone like a counselor, it makes you feel you sort of get that reassurance that you're not alone and that it's normal, to feel those things. But that's how it started.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that, because that's a very hard space to gauge for a lot of people. Some people it's okay, it's just normalized happy days, and others not so much. And the fact that you had a counselor that was culturally very, very similar to you obviously makes a huge difference. So you have that's your one hurdle that you crossed there. The next one is taking a gap year. When you tell people you want to take a gap year, what is that like? You've already mentioned before that people are like, what are you doing? What is that like for you though? Because obviously you have all these expectations and all these pressures, I guess, but you've made the choice for yourself. What is that like? How is that like for you?
Oh my gosh. Literally the best decision I ever made was to take a gap year, because it was hard. I would say it was hard because even though I told myself I'm going to take a gap year, I was like already looking for like things to do, already looking for how I can like give and stuff. But eventually I knew, like sitting down with my parents and telling them that I needed a break. My parents have been really good at holding me accountable, and just, saying, hey, you said this year you're going to take a break. But man, this year, I think, one of the main reasons I wanted to take a gap year as well is just because I kept asking myself, like, how can I help other people if I can't even help myself? And I'm always someone who always wants to reflect the words that I say. Like I always want my actions to reflect the words that I'm telling people. And if I'm telling people like, all these things, but I'm literally like going through it, I'm literally struggling, then it makes me feel like I'm a hypocrite for even doing that in the first place. And especially with this whole public health and Pacific health, I want to be able to help my Pacific communities, but I know that I won't be able to help them unless I actually help myself. So this gap year has really helped grounded me, has really and especially being at home with my family, it's really made me look at my priorities, really made me look at my foundations, my values again, and it's really brought me back into this place where I have a clearer mind, and I have a sense of peace, and I know what I'm gonna do, I know where I'm gonna go, and yeah, that's what.
And that's so beautiful because sometimes you just have to go back to your grounding. And
Yeah.
University is amazing and it's fantastic and it's got its ups and its downs, but it also takes you away from your grounding. And the fact that you've gone back home now to your grounding and you can put everything into perspective, all your learnings, your academic learning plus your life learnings come into play, and you can have a year to think about, okay, how do I actually help people now? I've got all these things here. What do I do? Which is awesome. And I have to acknowledge and say, your bravery of actually doing it, because I'm sure the expectation for you at maybe in April to go, actually, I've done my 3 months now, I can do something else now, what I've come in. So it's awesome that you're sticking to that. And I mean, hopefully it's not June. Hopefully the same thing happens when I see you in December. So
Yeah. No, because the first few months when I was here, I was literally struggling so much because I wanted, I nearly changed my mind. I was like, maybe I need to go back to uni. All those things of your body telling you to rest, but then your mind telling you, no, you need to keep going. You need to keep going.
Yeah.
Because it's a very, it's a very hard thing. One thing my uncle told me as well is that he told me this quote. He was like, it takes more faith to rest than to work. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is so true, because it takes so much to take a break and to put your mental health first, and forget about what people are saying, the expectations, the pressures you have. It's so hard not to give in to that, especially coming from a culture that's very around collectivism and around doing things for other people. It's quite hard being selfish.
It is very hard to be selfish, and that's what a great quote. What a great quote, because it's true, right? We live in a world where you have to be perceived to be busy all the time doing stuff, and if you're not, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, I'm just trying to get better, and also trying to get better. Sometimes go, oh, what's wrong? I can't see any physical manifestation. What are you talking about? Yeah. So it's awesome that you're sticking to that there. I mean, you're such a great person to speak to. We've been speaking to over an hour now. We should probably start wrapping this up here. Before I wrap it up, though, I just want to bring Tana in here. Tana, you have faced the same sort of thing of keeping busy, and how do you, when you reflect on that, what do you think about that? Because we've had this conversation before as well.
I think it's it's definitely a hard thing to juggle. I know that as I go into next semester with less papers, it's going to be a challenge for me to not find other things to do. But I guess also, reflecting on my role as a subwarden, when we think of role modeling, we think of doing these positive things that are good role modeling for the younger students. But what we often forget is it's also the behaviors you already do that might impact their perception of what they're supposed to be doing. So, for me, something that I did struggle with towards the end of this last semester was staying up quite late with residents doing things. And, although I think that's good because it's supporting students, it may also have a negative impact because the students are going, oh, well, if he can stay up late and still do all these other things, then I should be able to do that as well. So as I reflect, it's not just about doing all these good behaviors and being a good citizen. It's also about, looking at my behaviors and saying, just because I'm able to do it, is that having an impact on the greater students in terms of, good habits and habits that they need to learn going further in their journey.
Yeah, and then that's an awesome, because people mirror people that they are inspired by. Yeah. And sometimes inspiration is amazing, and sometimes inspiration is way. Like, for example, if you get inspired by David Goggins and you're like, oh, I'm going to run 100 miles a day, what the hell? That's not good, right? That's not very good. So that's an awesome awareness there. Faithing, this is the hardest question that we always ask our guests in our podcast. Our podcast is called, when I say hardest, I mean it's the most challenging, but it's the most rewarding one. Our podcast is called Bastards of Knowledge. And as you've shared in today's story, there's tons of things in your life there that could fill up any boxes of knowledge around your journey so far. But if you could pick one piece of advice that you would like to be able to put into their boxes of knowledge, what would that be for anyone listening out there?
One piece of advice.
Or a learning, I guess.
This is a hard one. I'm not thinking about it. Just one piece of advice or knowledge I would pass on is never be afraid to take a break or to rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I would say. Never be afraid to take a break or to rest. It's gonna be hard, but it's needed.
Yeah, and I think that's in all contexts of life, whether you're at university or whether you're working or with whatever, because what that piece of advice that you're given is not just you're a student, you need to take a break. Also, when you're an adult and you are going to work, we're so busy grinding from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Then we think we have to jump onto emails at night and we have to keep going. We have to jump onto our social media. We have to keep everything going. But it's okay, like you say, just to go, actually, I'm just going to turn on my computer, not look at my emails for the weekend, and the world is not going to end unless of course you're a doctor. But you've got to be responsible for your own well-being.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup unless you drink air.
Yeah.
No one drinks air, right? Yeah. Tan, any last words for Faithing?
No, it's been awesome to hear your story. Obviously, I met you in 2020 as you were one of our subwardens at Studham.
Yeah.
It's just been awesome to hear your journey, what you're doing now, and where you've gone since I first met you.
Yeah, awesome. And Faithing, I just want to, as we wind up, I just want to go back to right where we said at the start. Knowing someone's name, knowing the impact that people have in your life. You've had that happen through different parts of your life, and today you've just spoken about a couple. You've spoken about Mr. Diamond, Mr. Williams, but also the email that you got about Popo, the conversation over a free lunch about the health sciences, the fact that you wanted to have a conversation with the counselor. All these people in your life that have come through at different stages, and they've impacted you in a way that's affected the way you live your life. And I think that's what's important to remember for everybody, that there's going to be someone in your life. Every day you meet lots of people, and one of those people is going to impact your life either positively or negatively. It goes both ways. So be aware of who you surround yourself with. But I think you are an amazing human being. Thank you so much for jumping into our podcast. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And I know there could be so much more we can delve into, but we want to go and enjoy. We want you to take a break and enjoy your holiday as well. So
Thanks.
on that note, to our listeners out there, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for watching on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast here. As always, feel free to like, comment, share this podcast to people that you think would to learn from it. And the most important thing for you as you go forward is remember every day, try and put one piece of knowledge in your basket. Thank you, everybody. Bye.